Ever heard of a romance so perfect it turned into a total nightmare?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, today we're diving into one of those stories.
Okay.
It's about Margie, a recently divorced woman with 3 daughters
Mm-hmm.
who was, more than ready to find love again.
Yeah.
And she did, or so she thought.
Oh, boy.
This deep dive is based on a transcript
Okay.
with a pretty ominous title,
Uh-oh.
Triple Murder Case .txt.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, things get pretty intense.
It's fascinating how much our desire for connection can sometimes make us vulnerable to manipulation.
Right.
And that's definitely something we'll see unfold here.
Exactly. So Margie, encouraged by her friends, decides to ease back into the dating scene.
Okay.
She goes to a country western club,
Mm-hmm.
not really expecting to meet anyone.
Mm.
But that's where she meets Sean Paul.
All right.
Now, he was standing out from the crowd in a simple white shirt and jeans.
Interesting.
Definitely not your typical cowboy attire.
No, not at all. And right from the start, you see him setting himself apart, almost subconsciously piquing her interest.
Right.
It's subtle, but it's a classic tactic used by con artists to grab attention.
Yeah, and grab her attention. He did.
Uh-huh.
Sean Paul was charming, smooth-talking,
Okay.
and told Margie he was a chef with big dreams of opening his own restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
They hit it off, immediately talked on the phone nonstop for a week.
Wow.
And Margie started to think, could this be it?
Yeah, this is where con artists really excel.
Right.
They're masters at crafting believable personas.
Mhm.
Think of it like an actor meticulously studying for a role.
I see.
They'll often weave in details designed to evoke sympathy and establish trust.
And that's exactly what Sean Paul did.
Oh, really?
He revealed to Margie that his entire family tragically died in a plane crash,
Oh, wow.
leaving him all alone.
Oh, God.
This really pulled at Margie's heartstrings.
Of course. I mean, this tragic backstory serves a dual purpose.
Right.
It explains away the absence of any family connections Margie might try to verify.
Right.
And it paints him as a sympathetic figure worthy of compassion.
Mm.
Essentially, it's a way of disarming any potential skepticism.
Clever,
Yeah,
but incredibly chilling when you realize what's really going on.
definitely. So how did their relationship progress from there?
Well, their romance quickly blossomed with fancy dinners, thoughtful gifts,
Sounds nice.
and all the romantic trappings.
Okay.
But then some red flags started to appear.
Red flags.
Yeah, like Sean Paul's strange aversion to being called by his full name.
Interesting.
He insisted on just Sean Paul, nothing more.
Hmm.
And he gets super awkward whenever Margie's daughter tried to take a picture of them together.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. It's crucial to pay attention to these early warning signs.
Right.
They're often subtle and easily dismissed as quirks or insecurities, but they can be incredibly revealing.
Yeah, and then things took a bit of a creepy turn.
Okay.
Sean Paul decided to surprise Margie by buying gym clothes for her and her daughters.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where it gets unsettling. He snuck into her house to hang them up.
He snuck in.
Yeah, thankfully there was no forced entry, but it was a clear violation of her privacy.
Yeah. I see this incident reveals controlling personality and a disregard for boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
This behavior should have been a significant red flag, but unfortunately, Margie was caught up in the romance and likely chose to ignore it.
And the manipulation didn't end there.
What else did he do?
Remember that heartbreaking story about Sean Paul's daughter dying in a car accident? Well, that turned out to be completely fabricated.
Oh, wow. So he just made that up.
Yeah.
Inventing a tragedy is a potent way to elicit sympathy and lower someone's guard.
Right.
It creates a powerful emotional bond that makes it harder for the victim to question inconsistencies later on.
And Margie, being the kind and empathetic person she is,
Yeah.
rushed over to comfort Sean Paul at his apartment.
Okay.
But when he opened the door, she caught a glimpse of something that chilled her to the bone.
Oh.
She described it as pure evil. It was so unsettling that she quickly made an excuse and left.
Gosh, that visceral reaction is incredibly important.
Yeah.
It was Margie's intuition screaming at her that something was deeply wrong.
Right.
However, the manipulation was already so deeply ingrained that she rationalized it away.
It's tragic how easily our better judgment can be clouded in these situations.
It really is. And just when Margie was starting to question everything, Sean Paul pulled another heartstring move.
What did he do?
He claimed he had to pawn his gold necklace.
His gold necklace.
Yeah, to pay for all those extravagant gifts he'd showered her with.
Oh, wow. Classic guilt trip.
Right.
Designed to make Margie feel indebted to him.
Exactly, and further discourage her from questioning his actions.
Yeah, a con artist will often try to shift the blame and make their victim feel responsible for their actions.
Absolutely.
And it worked. They got back together, and their relationship progressed at lightning speed.
Oh, no.
Soon Sean Paul proposed they were married, and he began moving his things into Margie's house.
This rapid progression of a relationship is another hallmark of a con artist.
Really?
Yeah, they aim to solidify their position of control before the victim has time to fully process what's happening.
And Margie did have some lingering doubts, especially when Sean Paul insisted on merging their finances.
Uh-oh.
She signed documents without reading them, placing her complete trust in him.
That's never a good idea. You know, this is often the beginning of the financial exploitation stage.
Oh, wow.
Con artists frequently aim to gain control of their victims' assets as quickly as possible, often through seemingly innocent means.
And this is where things take a dark turn.
Okay, what happened?
One night, Margie's friend called her, urging her to watch the TV show America's Most Wanted.
America's Most Wanted.
Yeah, the reason.
Why?
The fugitive they were featuring, a man named Paul Stephen Mack, looked a lot like her husband.
Oh my God. Talk about a reality check.
Right. Seeing a wanted fugitive who looked exactly like her husband
I mean,
must have been terrifying.
oh yeah, absolutely terrifying for Margie. It's like something out of a movie.
So what did she do?
Well,
Did she go straight to the police?
she didn't right away.
Okay.
You see, she was still really invested in the relationship.
Makes sense.
So instead, she decided to do some digging on her own.
On her own. How?
Well, remember those documents Sean Paul had about his family's deaths?
The ones that tugged at Margie's heartstrings.
Exactly, the ones that made her feel so sorry for him.
Right.
Well, she decided to take a closer look at those.
Smart move.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's always good to trust your gut
Always.
and verify information, especially when things feel off.
Especially then.
What did she find?
Well, she noticed something fishy with the death certificate of Sean Paul's daughter.
Fishy how?
The date was wrong, and none of the documents had official seals.
So, like, they were fake.
Exactly. It was as if they were hastily put together, almost like...
Like they were fake.
Right. Forged documents are a major red flag.
Yeah.
They point to a deliberate attempt to create a false narrative.
And that's when the alarm bells really started ringing for Margie.
Oh, yeah.
So she finally confronted Sean Paul about it.
She did, but he kind of brushed it off.
Brushed it off.
Yeah, promised to get it sorted out.
Oh, so classic deflection tactic.
Total deflection tactic. But Margie knew something was seriously wrong.
Of course.
She had 3 daughters to protect, and she couldn't ignore these red flags any longer.
Right.
So she took a bold step.
What did she do?
She hired a private investigator.
Wow, that takes a lot of courage.
I know, right?
She was actively challenging the man she was married to, putting herself at potential risk.
Absolutely.
So what did the investigator need to start digging into Sean Paul's past?
Well, he needed 2 things.
Okay.
Sean Paul's social security number
Hmm?
and a substantial deposit.
Oh, gosh. So how did Margie get that information?
Well, that was the catch.
What do you mean?
She had to get this information from the very person she was investigating.
Talk about high stakes.
Right. I mean, it was a risky move.
So how did she pull that off?
Well, she waited until Sean Paul was asleep, snuck into his wallet, and found not 1, but 2 social security cards. 2 social security cards.
Oh my gosh, this just keeps getting more and more suspicious.
Right. This discovery just added another layer of deception to Sean Paul's persona.
Yeah.
Remember, con artists are skilled at creating elaborate facades to hide their true identities.
So she handed the numbers over to the investigator.
She did, and the news she got back was chilling.
Oh no, what happened?
The investigator discovered that both social security numbers belonged to deceased individuals.
Oh, wow.
The web of lies was unraveling, and Margie realized she was way over her head.
So she finally went to the police.
Well, you would think so, right?
Yeah.
But Margie still hesitated.
Hesitated. Why?
Maybe she was in denial, or maybe she was afraid of the consequences.
I see.
But instead of going to the police, she focused on getting her hands on some documents.
Documents.
Yeah, she believed they were locked away in Sean Paul's briefcase.
Oh, so to like secret documents.
He'd always been very secretive about them.
So they must have been pretty important if he was keeping them under lock and key.
Yeah, they must have been.
What did Margie do?
Well, she decided to take matters into her own hands.
Oh no, what did she do?
While Sean Paul was at work,
Uh-huh.
Marja staged a daring heist.
A heist?
She figured out the combination to his briefcase,
Okay.
photographed all the documents,
And
and then returned everything to its original place as if nothing had happened.
Wow, that's incredibly brave.
Yeah.
Talk about thinking on your feet under pressure.
Right. It really shows how resourceful and determined Margie was becoming.
Yeah.
She was no longer the passive, trusting woman she was at the beginning of the relationship.
So what did these documents reveal?
They contained even more inconsistencies about his daughter's death.
Oh, wow. So more lies.
More lies, further confirming his elaborate deception.
Right.
But confronting Sean Paul directly was becoming increasingly dangerous.
Yeah.
You see, he was growing more volatile and suspicious, probably sensing that Margie was on to him.
It makes sense that he would get defensive.
Yeah.
I mean, his carefully constructed facade was starting to crumble.
Right.
So did his behavior towards Margie change.
Oh, absolutely. How so? Well, con artists often become more aggressive when their lies are exposed.
Oh.
They feel threatened and may lash out in an attempt to regain control.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened with Sean Paul.
What did he do?
He started exhibiting some alarming behavior.
Alarming.
Yeah, that put Margie and her daughters at risk.
So, like, what kind of behaviors?
Well, one terrifying incident involved Margie's daughters.
Her daughters.
Yeah, 2 men showed up at the house,
2 men?
claiming that Sean Paul had sent them to take the girls to an amusement park.
Wait, what? That's horrifying.
Oh, it was a blatant power play designed to instill fear in Margie
Oh, my God.
and demonstrate his control over her and her family.
Right.
The girls were scared and confused, but thankfully they eventually returned home safely.
Did Sean Paul try to explain this?
Yeah, he acted cold and dismissive.
Cold and dismissive.
Yeah, as if it was no big deal.
Wow.
The girls later said that Sean Paul had spoken to them on the phone.
On the phone?
Yeah, assuring them it was okay to go with these strangers.
That's chilling. He was willing to use her children as pawns in his twisted game.
He was.
At this point, Margie must have known she had to get out of this situation.
She did.
So did she finally go to the police?
Well, she knew she needed concrete evidence to take to the police.
Evidence of what?
Something that would prove Sean Paul's true identity and his criminal past.
Right.
And that's when things took a truly horrifying turn.
What happened?
Well, one night, Margie wasn't feeling well,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Sean Paul insisted she take a pill.
A pill.
Yeah, that he claimed would make her feel better.
That's a huge red flag. Offering medication without proper knowledge or consent is incredibly dangerous
It is.
and can be a tactic used to incapacitate victims.
Exactly, and that's precisely what happened to Margie.
Oh, no.
She became violently ill and drifted in and out of consciousness. She vaguely remembers feeling someone on top of her, trying to scream, but no sound coming out.
Oh, my God. She was drugged and assaulted.
It was a brutal violation of her trust and a stark reminder of the depravity that can hide beneath the charming facade of a con artist.
This must have been a breaking point for Margie.
It was.
So she finally went to the police.
She did, and in the midst of this trauma, she demonstrated remarkable presence of mind.
What do you mean?
When Sean Paul left for work,
Okay.
she noticed an orange juice glass he had used. She remembered that fingerprints could be lifted from surfaces like that.
So she took the glass to the police.
She did. It was a brave decision.
It was.
She overcame her fear and shame and told the police everything.
Everything.
About the social security cards, the fake documents,
Mm.
and the growing fear she had for her and her daughter's safety.
It couldn't have been easy to relive those experiences,
No, it couldn't have.
but she knew it was the right thing to do.
She did.
So what did the police do?
They took the glass and ran the fingerprints. The confirmation came back, and it sent chills down Margie's spine.
What was it?
The man she knew as Sean Paul was indeed Paul Stephen Mack.
Wow, that must have been both validating and terrifying.
I bet.
Her suspicions were confirmed, but the reality of being married to a dangerous criminal must have been overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely.
What happened next?
It turns out it's even worse than just a stolen identity.
What do you mean?
This Paul Stephen Mack,
Yeah.
he's wanted for murder.
For murder.
Not one, but 2 brutal murders.
Oh my God, this is insane.
That's when the true horror of the situation really hit home for Margie.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about lies and manipulation anymore.
Right.
It was about violence and a complete disregard for human life.
This wasn't just a con man.
No.
This was a dangerous predator.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
what did the police tell Margie about these murders?
Yeah, give us the details. It's important for our listeners to understand just how serious the situation was.
Well, the first murder Paul Stephen Mack committed was back when he was just 19 years old.
19 years old.
His victim was a young secretary named Annette Huddle.
Oh, God.
He strangled her
He strangled her.
and dumped her body in a river.
That's awful. Was he ever convicted for that crime?
No, tragically, there wasn't enough evidence at the time.
So they just let him go.
And he was released.
Oh, wow. And that's when he met his second victim. Karen Winslet. So he was literally a free man after committing murder.
It's a harsh reality that sometimes the justice system fails to bring perpetrators to justice.
Right.
And in this case, it allowed Paul Stephen Mack to continue his pattern of violence.
What happened to Karen Winslet?
Paul Stephen Mack poisoned her,
Poisoned her.
raped her,
Oh my God.
and then stuffed her body into the trunk of her car,
This is horrible.
leaving it abandoned in a parking lot.
And then he just disappeared.
That's when he disappeared,
Well,
eventually making his way to Salt Lake City and assuming the identity of Sean Paul.
It's crazy how he was able to just create this whole new life for himself.
I know, right? Weaving this intricate web of lies to trap his next victim.
so knowing all of this, what did the police advise Margie to do? I mean, she was living with this monster.
They urged Margie and her daughters to leave the house immediately for their safety.
Right?
They knew Paul Stephen Mack was dangerous
Yeah.
and that Margie was in imminent danger.
But Margie had already started digging into Sean Paul's past.
Right.
I mean, confronting him about the inconsistencies she had found.
Uh-huh.
So he was already suspicious. Did she leave?
No, she made a difficult, incredibly brave decision to stay.
To stay.
She knew that if she wasn't there when Paul Stephen Mack got home,
Yeah.
he'd realize she was on to him
Right.
and disappear.
But who knows what he might do then?
Exactly.
So she basically acted as bait to help the police apprehend him.
It was an incredibly risky move,
It was.
but she felt it was the only way to ensure he was caught and couldn't hurt anyone else.
Wow.
The police planned to arrive early the next morning to arrest him.
I can't even imagine the terror she must have felt knowing she was spending the night with a wanted murderer. What was that night like for Margie?
She sent her daughters to stay with a friend,
Okay.
but she remained in the house,
Wow.
facing her worst nightmare head on.
That's incredible.
She tried to act normal even though she was petrified.
I bet.
She went to bed, but of course sleep was impossible.
Yeah.
She spent the entire night listening, waiting,
Just waiting.
every sound magnifying her fear.
I can't even fathom that level of terror, knowing that the man sleeping next to you is capable of such horrific violence.
It was a testament to her incredible strength and resilience.
It really was. So what happened when the police arrived?
Just as the sun began to rise, the police surrounded the house.
Okay.
Margie heard the pounding on the door.
Yeah.
And in a flash, Paul Stephen Mack jumped out of bed,
He did.
threw on some clothes, ran to the bathroom, and then he escaped through the window.
He got away. Oh my God, that must have been terrifying for Margie.
It was a tense moment.
So what happened? Did they catch him?
The police gave chase,
Okay.
and Margie waited, her heart pounding, fearing that he might get away and disappear forever.
Oh gosh.
But thankfully, the police were able to apprehend him before he could hurt anyone else.
Thank goodness. What a relief that must have been for Margie. But I imagine the trauma of the experience didn't just disappear.
Hmm.
What was the aftermath like for her?
It was devastating, it turned out. Paul Stephen Mack had cleaned out her bank accounts,
He cleaned out her bank accounts.
leaving her financially ruined.
Oh my.
And the emotional scars of his betrayal and abuse were deep.
So even though he was caught, he still managed to hurt her in a profound way. How awful did Margie ever recover from this experience?
Margie is a survivor.
Yeah.
It took time, but she started to rebuild her life piece by piece,
Good for her.
drawing strength from her daughters and her own incredible resilience.
It's amazing how the human spirit can endure such unimaginable hardship. Did she ever hear from Paul Stephen Mack again?
She did, and in a way that you might not expect.
What do you mean?
A few years later, while he was in prison,
Okay.
Paul Stephen Mack contacted Margie.
He reached out to her. Why?
He tried to manipulate her again,
Again?
claiming he was innocent,
Oh, come
who
on.
wanted to come back to her and her daughters.
Are you serious?
It was a chilling reminder that even behind bars, he was still trying to exert control over her.
But Margie wasn't falling for it this time.
This time, she saw him for who he truly was.
Good.
She refused to be drawn back into his web of lies.
I'm so glad she was able to stand up to him. So what happened to Paul Stephen Mack in the end?
3 years after his arrest, Paul Stephen Mack stood trial for the murder of Karen Winslet.
Okay.
Margie attended the trial, determined to see him held accountable for his crimes.
Good for her.
He tried to charm the jury,
Did it work?
but his act failed.
It's about time.
He was convicted and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison.
Wow. Finally, justice was served. But even a life sentence can't erase the pain and trauma he inflicted. Did Margie ever find a sense of closure?
She decided to visit him one last time in prison.
She visited him. Why?
Not to hear his lies,
Right.
but to deliver a powerful message.
What did she say?
She looked him in the eye and told him he hadn't broken her.
Wow.
She was a survivor, and she was moving forward with her life.
What an amazing woman. Her story is both terrifying and inspiring.
It really is.
It's a reminder that evil can lurk beneath the most charming facades.
And it's a testament to the strength of the human spirit,
Definitely.
the power of resilience, and the importance of trusting our instincts.
This deep dive leaves us with a lot to think about. How well do we really know the people we let into our lives? What red flags do we ignore in the pursuit of love and connection? And what steps can we take to protect ourselves from becoming victims of manipulation? These are questions worth pondering as we navigate the complexities of human relationships.